Hi, boys and girls. Mrs. Wilkins here, your favorite fifth grade teacher. Today, I am going to be reading to you our section from The Secrets of Canyon Cave. So if for some reason you did not already read the first part of Secrets of the Canyon Cave, click out of this video and go ahead and read the first part. You could either read the first part on your own or you can listen to me read it to you. There's a link here on right here in this video or in our Google Classroom, and the video is found right here on my YouTube channel. So if you did not read the first part of Secrets of the Canyon Cave, stop this video and do that right now, because today we are going to be working from our reading packet, lesson 16, day 1, and we are going to answer an open-ended response question together after reading Secrets of the Canyon Cave. Now, and most times, an open-ended response is a question you answer in response to reading or a particular subject. In this case, we need to read the section of Secrets of Canyon Cave before we actually answer our open-ended response. Okay, now I'm hoping that we can do this together. I want all of my students to be able to successfully answer an open-ended response using evidence and details from the text, and to be able to extend their writing. So we are going to do that using a strategy that I like to call WEEEC. All right. So again, if you did not read the first part of the story already, click out of this video and go do that now. But right now, we are going to hop into reading the second part of Secrets of the Canyon Cave. Now, you can either follow along with me in your text collection book, and if you don't have a text collection book, that's okay. You can actually just read it right with me here on the screen. So I'm going to open up to page 96, and you can do that if you have your book. This is a page where we're going to begin reading from today. We already found that the Ranger Merker separated the kids into groups, and they are already out exploring and adventuring this canyon. So let's go ahead and see what the two main characters are in the middle of by continuing our reading. Now, something that I like to do when I have to answer an open-ended response and I know it's coming, I actually like to look at the question that I'm going to answer. And just like always, your question for your open-ended response is found in a Google Classroom, and we will be typing the response together today in a Google Doc. So the question we have to answer is, are Brandon and Rhea truly explorers? Use evidence to support your text. So are Brandon and Rhea truly explorers? Use evidence to support your text. So that's the question we actually have to answer today as we read. And it's good to have that in mind, because then you could very easily, if you have your book in front of you, you can use Post-it notes to be able to use those close reading marks to mark up your page. You can put a heart next to anything that makes you think of a connection. Okay, you could also write down an exclamation point next to any text evidence, something that's going to help you answer the open-ended response. You can circle any words or jot them down in your reading packet of words maybe you don't understand. Okay, so you could use those close reading marks that I know that I taught you to mark up your page, or even to take some notes as you read. Since I'm doing this on the screen, I'm going to be taking some notes as we read. Again, I'm going to use an exclamation point for anything that I think is going to help me answer the question. I'm going to put a heart and jot down some text connections that I have as I'm reading, and a circle to circle any words or write down any words that I don't understand, and a question. So I'm going to be using those close reading marks as we read today. You can do the same thing on a paper or with Post-it notes. So let's begin reading on page 96. Good idea. Brandon pulled out his phone and called Ranger Merker while Rhea snapped photos with her phone. He let the ranger know that they would get back just as soon as they could, but they were given strict instructions to stay put, since it would soon be nightfall. In the morning, officials would come get them. Morning? Brandon wasn't thrilled at the thought of staying here overnight with a girl, no less. But at least he wasn't alone. And they did have backpacks filled with emergency items. Still, he never intended to be camping tonight. But Rhea didn't seem to mind. Her face was alight with curiosity as her hands traced the drawings on the walls. Simple scrawlings of stars, the moon, and a big sun shaped like a spiral. Can you believe this? Brandon, this is amazing. I already see something on page 96. So I'm going to write down page 96 because that actually kind of helps me to know some information that might be able to help me give text evidence. So an exclamation point on page 96, because page 96, the fact that they have backpacks and it said in the text that Ria's her face was alight with what? Curiosity. That might be something that I could use to prove that they are actually explorers, because if you are an explorer, that means that you may be curious about the area around you. Let's continue reading. Do you have anything, maybe a connection to the text? Let's continue. Can you believe this, Brandon? This is amazing. It is, he said, but he couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his stomach. They would never win the scavenger hunt now. He should have listened to Ria and gone toward Gooseneck State Park. Photos of the entrenched river would have won them the hunt for sure. Why did he have to be so cautious all the time? Well, I guess there's nothing to do but wait, he said, plopping onto the cold sandstone floor, crossing his legs. He watched with a heavy sigh as the driving rain poured the rocks outside. I'm going to read that again. That wasn't good fluency. I messed up a word. And that's called self-correcting when you go back and read a sentence. He watched with a heavy sigh as the driving rain pounded the rocks outside. As water pooled into small potholes and crevices, Brandon watched the sky shift from stormy gray to dark coral and then finally to a deep purple royal blue. He'd never slept in the desert before. Would they encounter black bears, coyotes, or worst of all, snakes? He took out his Swiss Army knife and set it next to him, just in case. Ria sat next to him, unzipped her backpack, and pulled out a water bottle and flashlight. A gust of wind whistled into the cave, chilling Brandon to the bone. The dry canyon was quickly losing its daytime heat. He yanked out his jacket from the backpack and put it on, hugging it close. Soon, the clouds cleared away and the night unfurled over the canyon like a giant blanket of black velvet with silver glitter spilled across it. Ooh, I think I'm going to write down the word next to my circle. I'm going to write down the word unfurled. That's a new word for me. Unfurled. And if I can use text evidence, I think unfurled because it says soon the clouds cleared away and the night unfurled over the canyon like a blanket, giant blanket of black velvet with silver glitter spilled across it. Maybe it means like revealed itself or to come on suddenly. And I like that it explained it like a blanket of black velvet. It helps me get a picture in my mind. Brandon ventured outside to admire it. Never in his life had he seen so many bright stars, shooting stars and faint purple and yellow blotches, which he guessed might be nublae or bands of the galaxy. There's another word. I'm going to write down nublae. Nebulae. Nebulae. I'm going to write down nebulae. But right there in the text right here, it actually tells us that nebulae is a band of the galaxy, which is a connection of stars. Let's continue. In the darkness, he vaguely detected shapes scuttling about, lizards or rodents trying to bring their meals home. In the distance, a coyote howled. Restless, Brandon returned to the cave. doing his best to imagine that he was on an ancient Anasazi tribesman trying to get ready for a good night's sleep out of harm's way. If they could do it, so can I. Now, for my heart, I remember a time. I remember a time where we went camping in Georgia, and that's like one of my text connections. What would that be if I have a text connection? Um, what would that be? I'm just going to put C for connection. If I have a text connection and it's about myself, what type of connection would that be? You're right. So I have a self to text connection, and that text connection is when I went camping with my family in Georgia, and I started off camping outside in the tent. And by the end of the night, I left the kids in the tent and I went to sleep in the car, which was like maybe like less than 100 feet away. So when I went camping in Georgia, I had that memory that it caused me to remember when Brandon and them are getting ready for nighttime. It reminded me of my first time sleeping outside at night under the stars, and I was so scared at one point because I thought there was like a raccoon or something like outside the tent, and I finally got up enough nerve to unzip the tent, and when I peeked my head outside the tent, it was not a raccoon, it was a bouncy ball blowing up against the tent. So I felt so silly. So it looks like they're settling in for a good night's sleep. It says, if they could do it, so can I. Let's continue. Do you have like a connection to the text that reminds you of something that you've been through a time before? I remember that so clearly. And when the next day my sister and everybody woke up and they were looking for me in the tent, and I was asleep in the car with the seat reclining back. So let's review while we wait for that to pop up. So I already have some text evidence. Maybe you have some more text evidence, an exclamation point next to something in your book. The fact that they had backpacks and Ria's face was alight with curiosity kind of helped me to know that, hey, maybe they are truly explorers, that were prepared with backpacks, and she was curious about the area around her. And my connection, which is a heart on my paper, is self to text. When I went camping in Georgia, that may be something that I could include in my answer, or something that may help me to extend my work here. Okay, come on, book. I may have to refresh. My thing says, Pearson says, look, this is in a corner. Not sure why my book is taking so long to load. Let me go ahead and try to refresh. There we go. Now let's go to the page I need. Loading plugins. Boom, we're all set. Check this out. Ria's voice echoed through the dwelling. He followed her voice in the swaying of her flashlight to the opposite end, where he found her staring at huge openings between the two tall boulders, like a doorway to another world. His gaze fell on what he saw. What is that? He asked, gawking at what appeared to be a kind of fence made entirely of twigs with twine or dried plant parts binding the intersections together. I have no idea, she said. It's like a grid. Brandon noticed that this wall of interconnected sticks had notches all over it, as if someone had used a sharp object to mark it in random places. Maybe trellis for growing plants? Ria shrugged. Out here? Plants? Brandon asked. What could it be? He glanced back at the cave walls, drawings of heavenly bodies everywhere. He took out his phone, snapped a photo of the fence, and sent Ranger Merker a text message. Look what we found. Any idea what this might be? I'm going to definitely mark off this page 98, because that might give me some text evidence. Page 98 in the first, second, third, fourth paragraph, because the fact that he's taking a picture and they're like examining it closely definitely is some text evidence. So I'm going to put down page 98, the fact that Brandon took a picture and they are examining structure they found closely. That might be some text evidence for our question that helps me to find out that, hey, they maybe really could be explorers. Let's continue. Look at what we found. Any idea what it can be? What about this? Rhea shone her flashlight at a pointed stick shooting straight up out of the floor, about 3 feet behind the wooden grid. How did these two objects belong together? Brandon wondered. Suddenly, a light went on inside his head. He moved over to the pointed stick and squatted behind it. If he aligned his eye to the very top point of the stick, maybe he would see. That's it! I got it, he cried. If you look past the end of this stick, it aims right at the star right there. You see it? He pointed into the open sky. The North Star? Rhea asked. I think so. He moved over to the grid and saw that the biggest cut was in the shape of an asterisk, lined up perfectly with the North Star. They used this thing to mark Polaris. He ran his fingers along the cuts. And these are all the surrounding stars that rotate around it throughout the night. See that star? And that one right there? Those make up the Big Dipper. He couldn't believe it. Did Ranger Merker know about this place? Did anyone? He couldn't wait to show his photos to everyone when they got back. Totally amazing. Rhea kneeled behind the stick and stared at the North Star through the wooden grid. So this stick is the viewfinder, and the grid is like the binoculars. Amazing indeed. They were truly explorers discovering new things. Bing, ding, ding dong, pow. There's some text evidence. It literally said in the text, they were truly explorers discovering new things. So I'm going to write down page 99 on my paper and then on my notes so you guys can see it. I'm going to write down page 99. The author states, comma, and I'm going to just take that exactly as the author says it. They were truly explorers discovering new things. They were truly explorers discovering new things. I got a typo. Guys, if you ever see anything in red, that means that something's wrong. Let's continue. Go back to the text and continue reading the last page together. Now, you may have some different text evidence than me, and that's okay. You may have different connections than me, and that's okay. You may have different words that you might want to look up to explore later, and that's okay. I am just showing you the process of what I would do if I were going through a text and I needed to find text evidence to prove the answer to the question or my response, or to formulate my response. I'm just going through the process of what I would do to be able to make sure I have enough to answer this like a middle schooler would. And I'm expecting 5 to 7 sentences for your open-ended responses. Now, let's read page 100 together. They gave each other high fives and then found a corner of the cave where they would sleep for the night. They bundled up their backpacks to use as pillows and faced the dwelling opening that exposed the northern sky. As he watched the falling stars glide across the sky, Brandon could barely contain his happiness. There he was, sleeping in the very same cave others had slept in long ago. Against the backdrop of cave paintings made by the same people with ingenious scientific tool made by human hands over 1,000 years ago. It boggled his mind. Good decision to come this way, Rhea spoke through the darkness. Thanks, Brandon said. Just then, Ranger Merker's reply text came in. Wow! Looks like you found an ancient device for measuring latitudes, like the sextant of long ago, or the compass we use today. Good job, guys. You so win the scavenger hunt. See you in the morning. Brandon smiled widely. We won? He told Rhea. Of course we did, because we're awesome. Her bubbly, laughing voice echoed throughout the cave. Good night, Brandon. Good night. And with one last contented sigh, he closed his eyes and fell fast asleep. So now we're going to go back to our question, okay? And now I'm going to see if we can actually answer it using WEEEC. The question we're answering is, are Brandon and Rhea truly explorers? And they says, use evidence from the text to support your response. And whether or not a question tells you to use text evidence, you should definitely always use text evidence. Now let's talk about what WEEEC means. For my fifth graders, you guys should know it by heart. WEEEC, the W in WEEEC stands for what? Wow the reader. How can you hook the reader to get excited about reading your response? The first E stands for elaborate, okay? Actually, no. The first E stands for explain. Explain your answer to the question. And then we have elaborate. After you elaborate, we want to find examples from the text. And finally, an example is something that's going to make your answer be more clear and evident. And then we want to make a connection. And we know there's 3 different types of connections: self to text to text, and text the world. And then the C, final part of the C, is a closing. Okay, a closing word, transitions. What are some that you can use for closings? Okay, some good ones are in conclusion, right? What are some other ones that we've learned? To finalize my thoughts. And remember, a conclusion is just a summary of your answer, pretty much, okay? Or you can say after reading, because we read a book today. So those are just some transitional words we can use. Now, let's go ahead and hop into answering the question together. The question is, are Brandon and Rhea truly explorers? Okay? Now, I think for my wow, I'm going to possibly use some information from the text, okay? Something like painting a picture, like setting description, description from the text. So maybe something like, with their backpacks set close, not the word set, packed tightly to their bodies, they set off for a day of adventure. What happened when they set off for a day of adventure? They eventually got lost, right? What's a way that I could say that they got lost, but make it an exaggeration? What's that called? I could use a hyperbole. With their backpacks packed tightly to their bodies, they set off for a day in adventure. But little did they. Who is they? Let's use evidence from the text. Rhea. Who's the other character? Brandon. So I'm going to use details from the text. I don't want to use pronouns when I could just type in their names. Little did Rhea and Brandon know they would be lost in a dark maze amongst the vast, no, what did they call it in the story that I said that I like? The black velvet sky. Boom, there's my wow. With their backpacks packed tightly to their bodies, they set off for a day of adventure. Let's not use they. Instead of using they, let's use a detail from the text. Who is they? Rhea and Brandon set off for a day of adventure. But little did Rhea and Brandon know they would be lost in a dark maze amongst the black velvet sky. That's a wow. That's a hook. I use setting description to be able to hook the reader. Now that I could, we're done this, let's go ahead and move on to explaining. Now with explaining, I'm just going to restate. Restating, it means taking a part of the question and putting it into your answer. So I'm going to choose another color, and you can do colors when you're writing your open-ended responses too to make sure you use each part of Wees. So I'm going to say, Brandon and Rhea are truly explorers. Now, how can I prove it? How can I elaborate it? Because it said it in the text, okay? So I can say, I know this because on page, what page was that? Did it say that they were truly explorers? I got it in my notes. Got it next to my exclamation point on my paper. I wrote down the page numbers. On page, what? 99, the author, what did the author state? Comma, they were truly explorers, discovering new things, period. And I'm going to put in my quotation marks because I took it right from the text. Now, after I explain, I can cross this off. I did that. Now I'm going to elaborate. Elaborate means give more details from the text, okay? How can I do that? Let me read my response. With their backpacks packed tightly to their bodies, Rhea and Brandon set off for a day of adventure. But little did Rhea and Brandon know they would be lost in a dark maze amongst the black velvet sky. Brandon and Rhea are truly explorers. I know this because on page 99, the author states they were truly explorers discovering new things. How can we elaborate? Right here, boom, bam, boom. I don't even need to go back to the text because I took notes. I'm smart. I took notes. I'm smart. Did you take notes? See, using those close reading marks are really going to help us, okay? So I'm smart. I took my notes. So I'm just going to elaborate by using what I put in my notes right here. Boom. Okay. What's another transition word I can use though to put that in when I'm like a prove it statement? I already have the author states. What's another prove it statement that we learned? A citing word or a citing phrase. I already said on page. I don't want to say that again. I could say in the text. Let's go with in the text. In the text, I'm going to use this. Oh, I got a better one. From my reading. I'm going to do that. From my reading. I'm going to change colors. From my reading, I know that Brandon and Rhea took pictures of what was that thing called in the story that they found with the stars? They called it a grid. They took pictures of the grid and they were examining it closely. They were examining it closely. The baby just distracted me. So I'm like, they examined it closely. They examined it closely. They examined it closely. Guys, you see how easy it is to get distracted when you're working from home? I'm going to read that sentence again. From my reading, I know that Brandon and Rhea took pictures of the grid and they were examining it closely, period. Now that I'm done elaborating, let's cross that off. Let's give an example from the text. I actually think these were two very good examples from the text. But what did they did after they examined it closely? I already used purple. Let's use something else. Let's use pink. Once they examined the structure, what did they do? Closely, they sent a picture. Who did they send a picture to? Ranger, what was his name? Instead of using him, I'm going to use his name. I think his name was Ranger Merker, right? And if you don't know, it's okay to go back to the text, okay? The book is right there. Go back in the text if it's something that you forgot to write down in your notes, all right? And a lot of times kids tend to use like him, her, they, it, like those words, those type of pronouns, because they just forget. And a part of close reading is just going back to the text and read it again. So I remember that it was Ranger Merker. So I'm going to use his name instead of saying him. So once they examined the structure closely, they sent a picture to Ranger Merker. I actually feel like I'm spelling his name wrong. So I'm going to go actually back to the text and see if I'm spelling his name the right way. Yep, I spelled it right. Ranger Merker. No, I didn't. Did I? M-E-R-K-E-R. Let's see. M-E-R-K-E-R. Yes, I did. So it's okay to go back to the text and just make sure you're right. So once they examined the structure closely, they sent a picture to Ranger Merker. This is what a real explorer might do. What does a real explorer do? And your answer could be a little bit different than mine. Explorers, what's another word for examine? Ooh, study. Explorers study their new finds and may even ask others for insight as to what they have discovered. That's a good example, don't you think? What comes after examples? Let's make a connection. Now, I told you about my connection I had was when I was camping in Georgia, but I honestly don't think that this connection is going to be a good one for this question, because the question is, are Brandon and Rhea truly explorers? And me being afraid to sleep outside at night and sleeping in a car is not a good connection to answer this question. So there's other types of ways you can extend your writing by thinking about text-to-text connections or text-to-world. So I'm going to read my response again. Sometimes just reading it helps me to find a way that I can extend my writing or make a connection. So I'm going to start from the top. With their backpacks packed tightly to their bodies, Rhea and Brandon set off for a day of adventure. But little did Rhea and Brandon know they would be lost in a dark maze amongst the black velvet sky. Brandon and Rhea are truly explorers. I know this because on page 99, the author states, they were truly explorers, discovering new things. From my reading, I know that Brandon and Rhea took pictures of the grid and they were examining it closely. Once they examined the structure closely, they sent a picture to Ranger Merker. This is what a real explorer might do. Explorers study their their new finds, and they may even ask others for insight as to what they have discovered. Reading this, I already noticed some of my mistakes, and you saw me fixing my mistakes, and that's a good reason why we should always reread our own work for mistakes. So what's a connection I have to this? How could I extend my writing for my connection? I'm just going to use like a text-to-world connection. This type of exploration helps us to? How does exploring the world around us help us every day? Help us to, of course, discover new things, learn more about the world around us. What else? What are you going to put for yours? I'm going to say this type of exploration helps us to expand our knowledge about the world around us. Boom. Now I can cross off example. I'm done. Now, and I can cross off connection. I'm done. Now let's conclude. I'm going to use a concluding word for my conclusion. Which word are you going to use? I think I'm just going to say, after reading, comma, I see that although Brandon and Rhea were trying to win, what were they trying to win? The scavenger hunt. They turned into real life explorers, which caused them to win the game. Boom. Now, it's so satisfying to like mark off everything once you've done it. So do this on your page. Isn't it satisfying to like, boom, cross that off, I did it. Boom, cross that off, I did it. Boom, cross that off, I did it. Boom, shakalaka, did that. Boom, cross it off. Boom, cross it off. It's so satisfying to like cross off every component of WEEEC once it's done. So do that on your page every time you do it, okay? And maybe you'll find like some sort of weird satisfaction that I do. Now let's go back and read our whole open-ended responses, just to make sure that I don't have any silly typos here and that I have, in fact, used each component of WEEEC. Let's read it from the top. With their backpacks packed tightly to their bodies, Rhea and Brandon set off for a day of adventure. But little did Rhea and Brandon know they would be lost in a dark maze amongst the black velvet sky. Brandon and Rhea are truly explorers. I know this because on page 99, the author states they were truly explorers, discovering new things. From my reading, I know that Brandon and Rhea took pictures of the grid, and they were examining it closely. Once they examined the structure closely, they sent a picture to Ranger Merker. This is what a real explorers might do. Explorers study their finds and may even ask others for insight as to what they have discovered. This type of exploration helps us to expand our knowledge about the world. Oops, there's a typo. World around us. After reading, I see that although Brandon and Rhea were trying to win the scavenger hunt, they turned into real-life explorers, which caused them to win the game. That is a great open-ended response. If you use WEEEC, it's going to turn out beautifully every single time. Now, how many sentences were we able to get using WEEEC? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 sentences using WEEEC. I always tell my students, if you use WEEEC, your open-ended response is going to be top-notch. Your teacher is going to be happy. You're going to be happy. Everybody's going to be happy. You're going to have your evidence all up in there, and your answer is just going to be what it needs to be. So thank you for tuning into this whole video, and I'm going to be expecting my 5th grade students to be writing like middle schoolers by using this strategy. Okay, so don't forget to upload your open-ended response to the Google Classroom today and every day that I assign you an open-ended response. Love you guys. See you in the next one. How do I stop the video? I see stop share. Oh, never mind.